if you are a leader in a business, I don't mean just a communications leader, if you are a leader full stop, it is your job to make sure that your team understands how they're using AI, in what use cases they're using AI, and what that means for them, right? That is your responsibility. We're well past the phase of kind of a wait and see moment for most businesses. There are certain industries where there's always an exception to every rule. We also know that. But we're at a point where that's the piece that it is our responsibility to make sure our teams understand that we've also given them the opportunity to say, this is what it means for me. And here's the opportunity in my role today, right? The changes that we've probably made to our own career progression ladders.
Mhm.
But to your question, I think you're trying to get to a heated issue. If someone gets out of line, that I think, my friend, is an HR issue and not a PR issue.
I dumped the lawsuit into the proprietary instance of the model we had. And I said, summarize this for me. And that's like table stakes. But then I started prompting a little bit harder and I said, let's get into what some of the underlying motivations could be for this lawsuit being brought. And then it was develop some counterpoint messaging that could be used to push back on the lawsuit. Then it was develop some messaging that could be used to undermine and attack the motivations of the party who brought the suit, right? I mean, this is pretty kind of in your face sort of communication stuff. Now, I wasn't going to do it, but I wanted to see what the model could do. And what blew me away was that the feedback I was getting out of the model was probably about 80%, 85% of what I'd have come up with on my own.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Comms Confidential, the podcast where we talk to the communicators who are leading the charge as our industry changes every day. I'm your host, Joe Gallo. Today, I've got with me two great guests, Adam Pratt, the Director of Issues and Government Communications over at IBM, and Tiffany Guarnaccia, the CEO and founder of Kite PR. Before we get to them, just want to remind you to, as one of our past guests said, smash that subscribe button and follow the podcast so you can get all the episodes as they hit Spotify, Apple, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Also, leave us a review if you like what you're hearing. If you don't, well, don't leave one. Adam and Tiffany, welcome to the pod.
Thanks for having us.
Great to be here, Joe.
So, quick question before we get into the deep dive of the conversation today, which I'm really excited about. We ask all of our guests, really, how did you land in communications? What's your origin story? Tiffany, why don't you go first?
Sure. Well, it started with a love of stories and storytelling. I was actually drawn to PR in college, stuck with it since then over many years. And I have to say, a lot of what we do hasn't changed. It's still about telling great stories and creating great experiences.
Yeah, if Tiffany's experience was intentional, mine was entirely accidental. I took a 6-month temporary job working on a kids' safety campaign in the state of Florida, and that turned into a 21-year career. But I think the parallel is, there's a beauty and a challenge that comes in helping people learn important things and hear important messages, and that's what gets me out of bed for this work every day.
Fantastic. So we came together, we had a conversation around AI use within the company, whether it's an agency for client work or as a corporation. This is a topic I think a lot of people are dealing with day in, day out, whether it's their own guidelines or policies or what have you. So really excited to have this conversation. Many surveys are already reporting that about 100% of PR pros are using AI. And for sake of argument, let's assume that's true. What do you think is the specific, what separates using from AI versus having an implementation? We're thinking systems and actually driving efficiency, but not everyone's using it that way.
You want to go first, Stephanie?
Sure. Okay. I think we both have a perspective to share, and we're coming from very different sides of the fence, right? I'm operating an agency that is a mid-sized agency, and so the way that I look at implementation is very different than such a large organization as yours. But in terms of the path that we've been on and what we're hearing in the market, I've seen a lot of similar companies go from a lot of tactical experimentation to implementation. And that has been, to answer your question, Joe, it's certainly been a journey that we've been on. It started out with a lot of testing and evaluation. Then we moved into looking at our team communications and making choices about the platforms we were using. And the implementation piece is really about reevaluating the systems for our agency, how we operate, how we make decisions, how we're producing client work, and putting a lot of structure and guardrails around that.
Yeah, I don't know that I believe the statistic. And and it's because I've talked over the past year, I've talked to a lot of groups of PR professionals, and they come to me saying, "How do we even get started with this?" Because we're being told we can't. We're being told if we do, we might get in trouble for it. Legal says no, IT says no. So that stat is, uh, we should all be skeptical of what we read. Let's just start with that. But I
Says the
think
PR
for
person, to be for the record.
says the PR guy, right? But look, I think when when we think about it, it's like there's a difference between using and realizing actual value, right? Like, sure, having AI built into Outlook, using Copilot or something to summarize an email, that sure that counts as use. But like, are you getting real transformational value in the way that you do your job? Like, is the nature of your work fundamentally transformed by that? Might make you a little faster, but I don't think it's transformational yet.
Right. Well, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Sorry. No,
I was just going to say, we talk about like identifying a specific pain point in your work, building a use case around that, kind of developing a proficiency in using the tool to address that specific use, and then finding ways to build that out within teams. So for us, at least within my corner of the very large organization I work in, it's been very kind of individual to small group to small team. And now what we're starting to see, which is really exciting when you're talking about 300,000 people in 170 countries, a huge top down push. So you're getting bottom up and top.
Yeah, I think it's interesting though when you think about we probably need to take a look at that and be true PR professionals and unpack some of the statistics because at a very like surface level, I'm sure most people have adopted AI in some shape or form, and that might be a custom GPT they have on their phone, or the reality is it's baked into a lot of the systems and platforms that we're already using. If you're on Muckrack, if you're on a lot of the existing PR tools and tech stack, it's going to be something that you're exposed to. And I think within that, we've also seen a lot of excitement and opportunity that's coming from both top down and bottom up. It's something that's not only coming from the providers we're using, but it's something you hear at conferences, right? I have a team that's at Possible this week. They're in a lot of different lounges and sessions, and the talk, of course, is AI. And that's been the case since 2023 when a lot of the solutions started coming onto the market. And what we heard as professionals was that AI won't replace you, but a woman who uses AI might replace you. So I think there's been excitement, pressure, and some ambiguity in adoption of AI, but I see it as a lot of opportunity for sure. But it's good to hear that a lot of people are getting their hands around different solutions because we're still very much at the precipice of a lot of this tremendous change.
yeah, I think that's right. We got to dive into the statistics and unpack it because I'm sure it is at 100% if you're literally just prompting for an answer, um, not necessarily using it for work. But let's talk about how you're using it for work a little bit. You both have really interesting ways that you're using it. Tiffany, you run a PR firm that services many different clients. Would love to hear how you use it within the client space because that is a little bit of a detached from the corporate knowledge base, I'll say. And then I would love to hear from you also. What was the moment where you said, okay, as the founder and CEO, like, we have to do this. This is a top-down mandate, and that moment of epiphany, if you will. And then Adam, a quick follow. You guys are using it in a very interesting way. IBM's been in the world of AI for years and years and years. Would love to hear just like again that moment of use versus talking about it and from going from research to the element of use in the comms function, and as much as you can share how you're using it. So Tiffany, why don't you take it?
There's a lot of questions, Joe, and I'm ready to answer. Let's try and go one by one, because I think when you start to track back and say like when was I first exposed to these solutions? Well, I have always been in the tech industry. A lot of it's B2B tech. I'm at the helm for the past 13 years of a tech PR agency. So, of course, our clients were in AI, we were in machine learning back in 2017, 2018. we were also naturally seeing a lot of AI startups come onto the scene. So we get exposed to it through our client base and through a lot of innovators that we're working with and are launching in the market. But at the same time that I have that client service hat on, I'm also very much in the role of seeing the vision for the agency, how the industry is changing. Both of you know I love the communications industry, and a lot of what I've done is just really look at what's at the forefront of communications. And very early on, our agency was using Google Gemini back in 2023 and into 2024. And we really saw like this is a game changer for the industry. It's going to be one of those big waves of technology that I really want the communications industry to capitalize on, just like we've seen a lot of changes. I've been in the career for 20 years when we first started looking at the advent of blogging and then social media and then everything that happened with the influencer and creator economy. And now we're facing this new wave of technology that's been brought about by AI. And the key piece from an agency perspective is how do we harness that technology to drive more value for our clients, right? It's all about in this adoption, that bigger picture is how do we change our structure? How do we roll out solutions and technology that's going to be in service of our clients? And it started in early days, even in those like first experimental days when we were looking at Gemini and looking at, to create our own gems of really specifically measuring from that standpoint of how is our time being spent, how
Hmm.
can we move admin time over to high value time, like thought leadership and client communications and client strategy? So we looked at rolling out AI and then measuring those tangible pieces based on how we were looking at the agency's time and the agency's evolution to make sure that when we were getting time back, we were putting it into the things that we thought would really move the needle for our clients overall.
But Adam, before we go to you, Tiffany, really curious about what you said there about the measurement side. How are you actually measuring like that productivity? Because as I talk to folks internally or in the industry, that is a big question of how are you measuring the efficiency that you're actually gaining?
There's a few things that we've looked at. So, when we first started rolling out new AI solutions, we were looking at measuring just the breakdown of time spent. We gave our team a directive, and I'm a very transparent leader. I want every single person on my team to be really excited about like, this is our North Star. This is where we're going. This is the opportunity. So, we gave our team a specific directive of I want to shrink the time that everyone's spending on these administrative tasks and then roll them over to that high value work. We still the agency is changing just like every agency
Of
is
course,
changing to move
of course.
towards different ways to structure and cost, but there's still time tracking through Harvest, which allows us to be able to see how our time is being spent so we can measure in that way. We also keep a close eye on client outputs, our client work overall, deliverables, and client satisfaction. So there's like the big barometers that you can set to look at is my business moving in the right way based on this technology rollout and what are we delivering? Those are some of the things that we're measuring. And then there's a whole probably next question after Adam jumps in to talk about how that's changed not only our structure and our teams and our technology, but how is it impacting the outputs and what other services can we provide that's truly representative of the future of PR.
All right, your next question is already on the docket, so start thinking of that one. Adam, go ahead.
Look, I think I've had a couple of aha moments in this journey. I mean, and a lot of it is grounded in the reality of my team and specifically the team that does issues and crisis communications. Okay. So you just think about the size and global scope of IBM. There are five of us that do this work full time, right? The demands on us to have global coverage, to be engaged globally is huge. So it's a bandwidth challenge, right? And, the first aha moment that I had involved a lawsuit, right? We get sued. And, this happened in the middle of 13 other things that were going on. And some new tooling had just been made available to us. And, I was short on time. So I dumped the lawsuit into the, proprietary the instance of the model that we had. And I said, summarize this for me. And that's like table stakes. But then I started prompting a little bit harder and I said, let's get into what some of the underlying motivations could be for this lawsuit being brought. And then it was develop some counterpoint messaging that could be used to push back on the lawsuit. Then it was develop some messaging that could be used to undermine and attack the motivations of the party who brought the suit, right? I mean, this is pretty kind of in your face sort of communication stuff. Now, I wasn't going to do it, but I wanted to see what the model could do. And what blew me away was that the feedback and output I was getting out of the model was probably about 80%, 85% of what I'd have come up with on my own. And then 15% of a couple of things that, because I was in the heat of the moment doing three or four other things, I wouldn't have thought of. So I was like, aha. So we've got a thought partner here. And especially when you are dealing with a crisis, you're on calls that last for 8 hours a day, right? Sometimes having that thought partner that you can bounce ideas off of and treat as a digital wingman or a wingwoman is just massively valuable when you're dealing with a small team that is charged with managing high stakes situations where there's not a lot of margin of error.
And I'm sure to your point about the being on calls 8 hours a day, like the speed at which you got the 85% that you would have come up with is probably faster than what you as a human would have come up with.
Incredibly. My second aha moment, and this is when I started becoming such a champion of AI that my team started rolling their eyes with the "oh, here he goes again" moment, was three of the five people were on vacation, and I had the bad thing happen, and it was like the bad thing that starts at 8 a.m. that runs until 8 o'clock at night. And I just started training, uh you know training one of my models on, like, okay, here it is, here's all the facts that I'm getting, here's the situation, here's what we're seeing in the media, here's what our employees are saying, here's what clients are saying. And what that meant was that as I was stuck on calls trying to keep the situation under control, because as you know, in a lot of instances, communications is the department of calm and context in these high stakes moments, I was able to turn out the framework of a crisis communications plan with some decent scenario planning baked into it of how this thing could spin out of control so we can prepare for it in about half an hour and have a product that was ready for executive leadership review in 2 hours. And that was with having gotten stakeholder input along the way. That's probably 2 hours of work that would have taken seven, maybe a day, if I was just sitting there with the blank page problem.
Hmm.
So that's where the real value started for us in on the issues and crisis side of things.
Gotcha. That makes total sense. I mean, that is, in my own experience, one, you mentioned the blank page. Getting past blank page syndrome is like a step improvement. Just plain and simple, you don't have to spend time thinking about it. And then you get to, okay, if you can get into edit mode, if you give it the right context and whatnot, I think that just is that's the efficiency unlock at like level one, if you will.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
so totally hear you on that.
And then level two is, my gosh, there's a capacity for idea generation here,
Uh-huh.
for some back and forth, right? For ideation in real time with these tools as a thought partner. And one of the things, going back to the prior question, we were talking about this, the huge numbers of people in our industry that are allegedly using AI, right? Um, you know, I think that there's a real stopping point for a lot of people, and I've heard this from groups that I talk to, especially if you're in house, especially if you're in constrained environments or you don't have a lot of familiarity with these tools. If you try something and you don't like what you get out, or it's off base, you have an unpleasant experience and then you stop, right? And I think there's a lot to be said for kind of helping more people across the industry understand that the first output is rarely going to be your end output. And there's a lot of iteration that has to go into these machines. It's not a vending machine, right? You don't get a perfect product out of the first try.
Right. Absolutely. So let's flip it a little bit for you, Tiffany. Or we're gonna role play a little bit. Adam's your client, right? You've been doing all this AI systems work for them. And now all of a sudden Adam has come to you and said he's built something. Is that to you a threat or proof the model worked? How do you manage that kind of a situation and keep your own expertise in the mix with the client?
Of that, Adam, thanks for being a client.
We appreciate the partnership, Tiffany.
I consider you're an excellent client, always easy to work with. And I do think it's an interesting question, Joe, because any of us as practitioners, we have to approach the market today with a high degree of agility and collaboration. So I fully expect that there's systems and solutions that I'm building that I'm operationalizing in the agency to increase efficiencies for Kite Hill, to keep us at the forefront of the industry and ahead of competitors, which I'm proud to continue to push us forward to do so. And equally, there are clients that are building their own systems and technology. And that's something that we're happy to work with them on, to use those different technologies. I don't think it's one in replace of another. It's how can we come together and think about collaboration and think about the end outputs that we need to have to get us to that point, and probably is a blend of both of the solutions. So even kind of peeking under the hood a little bit more about the work that we're doing, we moved pretty quickly from building our own solutions to now working with a platform over the past, I'd say, about 6 months. It's called Suits, and it's a platform that is designed for agencies in the communications field. And they have different agents that are pre-built into the solution. There's different workflows. And so what we've done, to the point of a little bit of a blend in customization and what's off the shelf, is take the Suits platform, use some of the existing workflows, and then build a Kite Hill layer on top of that. So there's a Kite Hill workflow for thought leadership. There's one for reporting. There's a lot of systems that we've built out. I think the next phase is interesting to see how much interest we get from clients that also want to use the system with us in a way that's up leveling our work. So I think it's maybe not one or the other. It's probably a combination of both.
Interesting. Are you providing the Kite Hill skinned suits to clients? Like this way there's more collaboration between the two?
I think your crystal ball is working well for you today. I can't give you an answer on kind of what's coming up in our pipeline, but that is we're
Fair.
looking at a solution on the horizon. We're actually looking for some beta clients now that are testing it out with us. We're doing a lot of the work that I'm doing behind the scenes is perfecting those workflows as much as possible. There's going to be iterations. It's technology. We're all in the business of tech, so there's constant iterations against it. But looking at the Kite Hill stamp on that to take it to market, it's working behind the scenes for us.
Gotcha. Adam, on the flip side of that role play, client side, are you thinking about sharing, like actually doing what Tiffany just said, sharing a platform, sharing information, or is there still a little bit of friction there? As in-house corporate comms folks know, it's like, okay, we can bring agencies so far, but we really have to do like the last 30%, 40% on our own because we have all the meetings and the institutional knowledge and all the other pieces.
It's an interesting question. When I think about it, my perspective is that an agency has a couple key value adds, right? Uh, Good ideas, good connections, and the ability to help us get things done. And I think AI being used on either side of the agency client relationship is just additive of that value add that an agency brings. I know that in my team's work, we will share with our external partners the work that we get out of some of the agents that we build internally to say, hey, what do you think about this? Help us kick this around, pressure test it, maybe bring some ideas to bear. That tension in the agency client relationship, I don't think it needs to be there. I think a lot of times it's an artificial or an institutional construct. I'm sounding a little Pollyanna-ish, right? But if you look at these tools as a way to add value, to make the work better, and to come up with good ideas, right, then it should benefit everybody on all sides.
Yeah. Um, so we're gonna challenge your Pollyanna-ishness right
Great.
now.
I love it because I'm usually Dr. Skeptical. So let's go. Right.
All right. Well, right. IBM is in a pretty regulated industry, or various regulated industries, I should say. Tiffany, you've got clients who deal with that as well. What do you do when someone steps out of line? They go outside of the corporate approved tools, and all of a sudden they're asking the free version of pick your provider for advice. How do you handle that situation as a manager, as a leader?
I introduced them to my good friends in the legal department. Uh, no, I mean, like, look, part of this starts with understanding, what the information control and information hygiene restrictions are around some of these tools. And, you know, especially for the work that my team does on issues in crisis. I mean, we're dealing with information that is business confidential, that could involve trade secrets, that is often legally privileged information. So it was a non-starter for us. We have to know in advance that the tool, two things, that the tool we're using is inside IBM's, information control environment, right? And two, that nothing that we put in there is going back out to train a public model. Okay, because you just cannot have that. To your point, we deal with all manner of regulation, but also data privacy laws, right? And governing business, personal, or sensitive personal information. So we had to have those controls in place. Um, what I tell a lot of the people that I talk to in our industry about this is that, like, look, if you're just dealing with public information, right? If you're trying to summarize headlines or you're trying to get a sense of what's going on out in the world and you're not dealing with anything that's internal or controlled within your organization, maybe a public model is okay with you, especially if you're in a smaller organization where they don't have the ability to go out and negotiate, a licensed environment where all of your information controls come into bear. Um, but that information hygiene consideration needs to be the first question that you ask, even before you move into any kind of an implementation, because otherwise you're creating all manner of risk, whether it's regulatory risk, reputation risk, legal liability and risk. So
Mhm.
in a lot of these journeys, your partners in IT and legal are your best friends to get started. Now, what blew the doors off for us was when they came forward to us and said, "Hey, oh, by the way, these instances of Copilot that we've provided within IBM are approved for use with confidential and privileged information." Okay, let's go. Right now we can build some stuff. Right, but you know, we're all very, very conscious of where the lines are.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with Adam. And even to kind of play off your point, when you're shaping a policy, that is when we've been leaning into, as we have, into the tech questions, into legal questions, into making sure
Mhm.
that we're creating closed systems. But at the point we're at today, if you are a leader in a business, I don't mean just a communications leader, if you are a leader full stop, it is your job to make sure that your team understands how they're using AI, in what use cases they're using AI, and what that means for them, right? That is your responsibility. We're well past the phase of kind of a wait and see moment for most businesses. There are certain industries where there's always an exception to every rule. We also know that. But we're at a point where that's the piece that it is our responsibility to make sure our teams understand that we've also given them the opportunity to say, this is what it means for me. And here's the opportunity in my role today, right? The changes that we've probably made to our own career progression ladders.
Mhm.
But to your question, I think you're trying to get to a heated issue. If someone gets out of line, that I think, my friend, is an HR issue and not a PR issue. So you might have to take that up with another department. I have to say, as a leader, if you're having something like that happen, there's probably other issues you might need to unpack with that particular employee. It's really an isolated incident, so something to discuss for sure.
Okay, well, fair answer. Fair answer. It's an HR issue, not a PR answer. I like that. I'm going to use that a lot around the office. So, at what levels are each of you bringing in um partners, for lack of a better word? And I don't mean external, I mean internal, or other teammates, employees, however you want to categorize it. Like, because one of the conversations I had recently was, I went and spoke at a group of Villanova, and one of the students actually asked, how do I balance I use AI and I have these skills when I'm talking in an interview? And it got me thinking, like, entry level employees, I could see them wanting to hide it. I see senior level employees wanting to hide their use of AI. Now, I'm very open about my use. I tell my boss regularly, I'm like, you're not being efficient enough. You need to kind of get Claude working for you here. But so I guess my question is, when you bring up the policy, when you're bringing up these systems, when you're developing these tools, are you guys keeping it to, say, more mid-level to senior? Are you thinking about the junior level and bringing them along? How do you think about, to your point, Tiffany, growth, career growth, um, but more in the development stage?
Sure. Well, I think, when it comes to initially shaping the policy, that's something that was done by the senior team, even in conjunction with the PR council, to make sure that we're not only looking at industry benchmarks, but as Adam's point, there's a lot of legalities to the work that we do, right? Public information, confidentiality, making sure that we're inside certain systems. But after that point, after we've selected the platform, we have the policy in place. That for me was more of a lesson in change management than it was about technology or than it was about a particular platform. So, in terms of change management, a key piece of that is to look at who were your early adopters at every level and looking at that peer group that is going to be the ones that are really another resource of information within the agency, within my team, that others can go to that are leading the way, that might also be pulling along some of the skeptics about the use of the tool or others that might be further behind. So it's coming from the top down and from the bottom up. We use Slack, so we have a Suits AI leaders channel where there's a group of professionals who are appointed leaders within the business that are sharing how they're testing, what's working, what's new on the solution. So there's a lot of motivation that's done from within.
Yeah, I think our experience has been very parallel to that. I mean, some of our folks who are kind of earliest in their career journeys have been hungry for this. They're demanding it. They want to be able to use it. I see the same thing from people who are longtime veterans of the company. So when we decided that, like within our team, we wanted to do more, we wanted to build an agent that could work with our entire team on the issues and crisis front. I grabbed someone who had about 2, 3 years of career experience and someone who has more than that. And they went off and they came back and built a wonderful agent that our entire team is availing itself of now, and that we're continuing to evolve the capabilities of on a rolling basis. I mean, look, that's the beauty of this technology, right? I mean, no matter what stage of your career in, this is the skill that you're going to need moving forward, right? Tiffany mentioned earlier the line, "You won't be replaced by this, but you'll be replaced by a woman who uses it better than you." Right? She's right, million percent. Right? So, like, I want to stay current in my skills. I've got 21 years on the job. I'm devoting half of my professional development and learning goals to this technology this year. My team is doing the same, right? Like this is something that every professional in this industry can go further and do more with, and I think that's a really exciting reality.
Yeah, I love that, Adam. I think we're on this journey of adoption and there's a lot of opportunity there. But it does constantly remind me of, I think, the phrase that a lot of our clients use and that's coming up in the industry that you might have heard too is human in the loop. And
Hmm.
that's important, kind of depending on the solution and maybe where you are in a certain value chain or supply chain. For the communications industry, I've really been pushing the importance of human oversight, really being the one, like you are at the end of the day responsible for the outputs, for everything that we're doing that's shaping communications stories for clients, experiences. So it does come back to the importance and the opportunity for us, right? Like the value that we provide as PR professionals is about that oversight. And what AI still isn't great at is context, right? It's kind of whether it's in a crisis or whether it's coming up within an industry conference or event, and kind of wrapping the context around the content is where I think there's so much opportunity for us to continue to lean into.
I'm glad you brought up the human in the loop phrasing, human oversight, because one, you're absolutely right. Right now, that is a critical piece of any workflow. But as if you listen to the AI, lack of a better word, luminaries who acknowledge that they don't know how the technology works, we're around the corner from AGI. We're around the corner from artificial general intelligence. So, look into your own crystal balls and tell us, do you think we're always going to need that human in the loop, or will it be on a scale? Crises, maybe yes. Other things, maybe no.
Yeah, I think it's going to be on a scale, and I think it's going to be gradiated by risk. Right? The riskier the implementation or the use case, the more critical that human involvement is. And the reason is, like, you can say human in the loop, but what does that really mean? It means at the end of the day, going to your boss, or if we really play this out, going to a regulator or going to a judge and saying, well, the model did it. That's never going to hold up as an excuse that gets you off the hook,
Just ask some law
right?
firms.
There you go. So there's always going to be that measure of accountability. These models are never, ever going to be able to replace fully, nor should they, nor should we allow them to replace human judgment, instinct, and expertise. Right? I mean, Tiffany, you were talking about context. context, that's what we do. IBM's chief human resources officer a couple years ago joined a town hall that our entire marketing and comms organization was part of. And she said, and I will never forget this, communications is the department that brings context to the organization at scale, right? No model can do that, right? And it's the technology may be fantastic. It may continue to grow exponentially by leaps and bounds. It's never going to be able to replace that.
Tiffany, do you have a take on this?
Well, I agree. I think you're asking, like, looking even further into the future around how agentic AI will develop. Things have moved so fast that I couldn't have imagined this a few years ago. Just the state of AI today. If you would have asked me in 2022 to predict the future around these technologies, it's hard to model because I don't think any of us have seen a technology that has been adopted so quickly. We've seen the models change so fast. We've seen everything that we're doing in terms of use cases continue to evolve. I think in the immediate future, we can continue to talk about the importance of human oversight. I think the big picture and the work that we do and what inspires us to be in communications is now the opportunity to take technology that's enabling us to do things. To Adam's example around crisis communications, how fast can you do research and do models and look at human behavior and package that up in a way that you couldn't before, that your decision is now elevated, but the context and the human creativity is part of it.
What worries you? We've been talking a lot about the benefits of AI. What worries you most about AI in the communications field specifically as it relates to your own teams or industry at large?
Good question as to kind of what keeps me up at night. And I think for me, the perspective is just to continue to push the agency forward and to, as much as possible, see around corners as to how we can look at technologies and build it into our workflow and elevate the work that we're doing. I certainly, of course, as any leader, feels the pressure of how fast can we adopt something that's changing the industry? How can we do that in a way that's staying within certain parameters and guardrails, right? So we're making sure that it's done in a way that makes sense for our team and for our clients. And then the big responsibility too is just communicating that so clearly along the way. And a lot of the communications professionals I'm working with are working with CEOs to really walk through step change. But this is where our organization is today. This is where we need to be. So I don't know if it's something that I'm worried about, but it's definitely something I'm sure a lot of professionals feel like the urgency or the pressure to continue to move forward at a certain pace. And that's actually where I remind myself, as someone who's always trying to be at the forefront, is like, is now the time to tap the brakes and in the rush to adopt so many solutions, really think about what piece at a time do we need to adopt to make sure that we're doing it right and really making sure that we're nailing each piece of a workflow so that in the future, then we can accelerate the adoption because we've baked in more solid foundations.
This one, I'm throwing Pollyanna Adam out the window.
Okay, good.
Um,
We've had enough
because
of him.
I don't look, I lose a lot of sleep for a lot of reasons, right? But I guess there are three things for me that really kind of jump out. One, the slot problem, right? Just kind of dump it into a model, get out something that feels, yeah, okay. Don't put any effort into making it better and just passing it along, right? Because then we're lowering the standards of the industry, and then we all suffer from that. That's one. Over tooling, right? Having sort of an embarrassment of riches on access to so many tools that are evolving so rapidly that the average professional doesn't know where to go, right? I was just having an exchange this morning with one of my colleagues about, have we launched a new AI, a multi-model AI development environment for this morning at IBM called Bob. And Bob is great. Bob's getting a lot of adoption, and I was playing with Bob this morning. But then it led to a conversation about, have we really clearly identified for internal purposes, right? The best use cases for Bob versus Copilot versus some of our own in-house AI solutions? And are we being really clear with our teams on where to go? Tooling overload seems to me to be like something that could be in our near-term future. And then the third thing I actually see as a problem of stratification within our profession. when it comes to AI skilling. And it's been really eye-opening for me to go out and talk to people who are like the public information officer at a health department in a mid-sized county in Indiana, right? Or the communications manager for a small municipal airport in Minnesota,
Mhm.
right? I think sometimes it's easy for those of us who touch this technology every day, whose companies are steeped in it. I mean, Tiffany, it's a huge part of your business right now, right? Joe, you and I work in tech and fintech services, right? We eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff, and a lot of our peer practitioners in the industry don't, or feel like they can't, or have been told they can't go anywhere near this technology. So you run the risk of having this kind of small-ish, highly motivated, deeply engaged pool of really forward-leaning communicators who are using this technology every single day, and then potentially a larger silent majority of the profession that doesn't know where to start and feels that anxiety, and maybe feels threatened in the course of their career. And I think those of us who are fortunate to be on the edge of this actually have a duty of obligation to like spend more time being out there talking to peers, networking, being part of groups where you're sharing skills and best practices like this, because you know this we don't need to have within the communications and PR industry a haves and have-nots problem.
Adam, you kind of nailed it. It's one of these things. I talked to a friend of mine who's outside of PR. He's in the recruiting field, and he's got he's building agents and whatnot. He's building an app to release on the App Store through Claude Code, and we've realized that we're kind of in this. I don't call it a reality distortion field, but we're in this kind of echo chamber of, well, I know I'm using it, you're using it. My TikTok feed is all about these tips of people who are better than me at it. And in reality, like, I have conversations every day with people where it's like, I'm like, "Oh, cool, look at this cool agent I built." And they're like, "How do I log on to this tool?" And I'm like, "Wait, I knew we weren't at the same place, but we're not even in the same ballpark." Um, so I think you're absolutely right. Like, it's up to use your phrasing before, the haves to help the have-nots in some regard. And that's the knowledge, not necessarily the tools. So how much do you guys worry about skills atrophy? The idea that, junior people, especially not the 20 plus year vets that we are, but the junior people are relying too much on AI. They're not necessarily knowing AP style, if you will, but just like true sentence structure, fact checking, making sure that there's no like data point that's hallucinated in there, and actually like bringing them along. Tiffany, you have a whole agency, I'm sure, with teammates that are thinking about this.
Sure, and I think, maybe the bigger picture that we're talking to is just when it comes to general adoption or even educating my team is who's responsible for education at a point of mass adoption of a new technology. And I think that responsibility is shared. It's certainly shared by the organization and leaders. And that's something as much as I see the balance of pushing everything AI in terms of the solutions and platforms, we have to balance that with what we call Kite Hill University and developing new sessions on AI writing, AI editing. Every call I'm on, I'm like, you've used AI to write content, get out your red pen because you're going to need to do a lot of editing. And I think it's just a new way that in any environment as a leader, you have that hands on experience. I also see the importance of a lot of education that's coming out from industry bodies, from other players like Reagan, constantly rolling out new tools, solutions, and courses. But the reality that Adam's pointing to is that not everyone has that ability to access that information. So I do think it's important and a big opportunity for us to share the knowledge that we have because a lot of learning is not only done about reading an article or attending a course. It's like the hands-on expertise. Tell me how you're doing it. How is it working in your life, in your job? And I think that's great for even you within the context of this conversation today to really pull out some of the things that are working for us and some of the things that are on the horizon. Do you think it's here to stay? You just kind of get a pulse on how we're thinking about technologies in a different way. And even from the next generation, I was talking to Adam, I have a 9-year-old, and she comes home from school and she's talking about how she's doing her homework and she wants to pick up my phone and ask ChatGPT about her multiplication, right? They're already there. They're ahead of us. They're already thinking about how they're using this. I didn't let her do it, by the way.
Okay. All right. Well, I've had that conversation with my wife about how at what age do we let our 7-year-old actually like start playing with AI. One thing that soured me on ChatGPT, I asked it to do a simple math problem around mileage around my lease, and it definitely got it wrong. And when I said it got it wrong, it said, "You're absolutely right. It's wrong." And I'm like, how can I trust you to not do this like simple math problem if with like real big problems?
To
Um,
say your software, you should do math good, right?
Yes, you should. Um, for our listeners, that was like several GPT models ago. I'm sure it's better now. I'm not playing one off the other. Nobody is advertising on this on this podcast, for the record. So curious about your dream build. What is one thing like one thing you've built that you're absolutely proud of, if you can share? And then one that you want so badly to have, but you just don't, whether you don't know how to start or you just haven't had the time to start or what have you, if you want to share, because I feel like that's the inspirational piece of that.
Well, I've got a tool that
Go
we've
for it.
built that I'm massively excited about.
Don't say Bob. We've
It's not
talked
Bob.
about Bob.
It's not Bob. And I'm sorry for the Bob plug. IBM is not sponsoring this podcast. Um, so we built a tool within our issues and crisis team called Nova. And the initial use case for Nova was basically institutional memory. And we got challenged by a relatively senior leader in the company to say, okay, you're recommending we take this position on this highly sensitive issue, sort of a cross between human rights, geopolitics, and all other manner of messes. How does that align to or conflict with positions we've taken in the past? And I knew the answer to that. I knew the answer to that because I had been there the last time when we first started dealing with these issues in 2014 and 2015. But it got us all worried about like, okay, well, we have a single point of failure problem, right? Because if I'm not around, or if I ever decide to take a vacation, right, the team needs to be able to access that information as well. So we built Nova, and then proceeded to train that agent on almost 15 years at this point of reactive plans, crisis response documents, content and assets that we had created, media coverage of positions we've taken on some of the company's most high profile and most sensitive issues. And we now are able to ensure that everyone on the team has access to that kind of democratized common set of knowledge and facts. We're able to do an alignment check on, going forward positioning. It also enables us to do a lot of really advanced scenario planning, right? That brings historical context into the mix, right? And it's just a really, really powerful thought partner, but also something that allows us to kind of avoid some of the learning curve that comes to bear if we have people cycle on and off the team, right? We've got that baseline measure of continuity where even someone who's been here for 3 or 6 months can go in, initiate a conversation with Nova, and get caught up to speed on some of these issues really, really, really quickly, right? And that's huge for us. And then as time has gone on, we have expanded Nova's capabilities to do more in terms of helping us develop briefing materials on sensitive issues extraordinarily rapidly for senior leadership, in addition to some ideation of like scenario planning based on how things could go even more wrong than they have by the time an issue gets to us. So we're always looking for ways to expand Nova, but it has been a force multiplier within our team's capabilities that we're really excited.
All right. I think Adam's going to need a minute to think about what he wants to build. So, Tiffany, what's the one thing you're proud of over at Kite Hill?
Yeah, well, it sounds like he's made some exciting progress, and yeah, lots of work has gone into it. I'd say there's a couple of things that we're proud of. I mean, we're always experimenting what works for us, but I mentioned some of the thought leadership workflows, the Kite Hill thought leadership workflow we have. We also have a Kite Hill pitch ideator, which is more of a proactivity engine that working with the team to really get ahead of a lot of the things that are breaking in media and new pitch ideas and just really helping to inspire our team members. And then another piece that we have is around the Kite reporting. And that was a big piece that when a lot of these new solutions were coming onto the market, I was laser focused in going to every level and members of my team and saying, what's taking you time that shouldn't be taking time, that's administrative, that you feel like AI could do so you could spend more time on the things that you want to do, the pitches that you want to get out in the market, the stories that you want to tell for clients. So the reporting piece is a big lift. It's something that we used to have dedicated headcount that was doing a lot of those. Remember those old school clip books? That's when I
Yep.
started.
Yep.
And a lot of that, you can do that reporting in a way that's automated, that saves time, that gets faster insight. So that to me is exciting. And then what's on the horizon, I do feel like there's a big opportunity in terms of the services that we're offering right now. There's a little bit too much of a gray area around AEO. There's probably in a
hmm
lot of conversations you're hearing from boards, from the C suite, from other communications leaders about the importance of AEO, or you could call it GEO. And within that, I'm really excited about how that piece of the industry is evolving. We have been working with a lot of our clients to think about how, of course, earned media influences AEO results. A lot of the work that we do that's in our scope that we're then measuring to see how it's impacting AI search is great for us, right? We're kind of coming back to an age where earned media is proving value in a different and new exciting way because of AI search. But there's a whole technical layer of AEO that goes hand in hand and overlaps. There's a Venn diagram, if you will, of AEO and SEO. And we're also rolling out new solutions that go deeper into that layer, which I'm very excited about. One, because I think it's a great opportunity for our clients. Two, almost more important is just the education around those solutions, right? Because there's a lot of gray area. There's also a lot of smoke and mirrors, people claiming to do that kind of work when it's a part of communications. And, I'm certainly one that wants to set the record straight.
Yeah, I might we might have to have a separate episode on just AEO GEO. You and I can go back and forth on it. I have thoughts. All right. So last want to leave everyone with an actionable item. We've talked about there's a spectrum of where people are. What is the one thing people can do in the next, say, 30 to 60 days to really like move from I'm prompting for answers to I'm starting to build for systems that are going to change workflow and make us more efficient?
Step back with a notepad and a piece of paper and think about your job. Write down one or two ways that your job gets bogged down every day, something that distracts you from the things that you most want to be able to do. Then pick your model of choice or whatever tool is available to you. Explain your job, what that pain point is, and ask the model to start a conversation with you about how it might be able to help. Because one of the things where I've seen tremendous value is engaging these tools in a back and forth conversation. And um, you get ideas, you get some creativity that a level of which is actually quite surprising. And in doing that, I've found some ways to get time consuming menial tasks off of my desk or at least speed them up. And that's how you go from prompting for an answer to realizing real value in the course of your job.
Yeah, I love that. Actually, I'm like a big like paper note taker. By the way, I've been doing that
hmm
session, just taking notes for myself. I think I'm a very visual thinker. Um,
And
n-
and
y-
never underestimate the power of a Sharpie
yeah,
because if you write it in a Sharpie, it really makes you think about it. So
that's true. Just don't give that to your kid
Yeah,
unless
I was just thinking that as mine has come home with plenty of
fair,
Sharpie marks.
we all
fair.
will. I think, just to Adam's point and to echo what he's saying is like give yourself the opportunity to take a big step back and have more of an exercise in strategic thinking. It's kind of that classic Zoom thinking where you want to zoom out and think about in the context of my job, what's the bigger picture and where can AI elevate the work that I'm doing? And then zoom in and break apart what are like the three systems that I can build to get me to that bigger picture. But it is, I think everything feels like it's moving so quickly. There's also, I talked about the pressure of accelerated technology. give yourself the opportunity to take a step back to look at the bigger picture and come to those bigger conclusions.
Fantastic.
Tiffany, what you were getting there at the end was sort of this anxiety that I think a lot of us feel, right? This technology can produce a lot of anxiety. Am I staying current enough? Am I on top of it? Right? Is the technology evolving faster than I'm keeping pace with the change? Is that putting me in jeopardy from a career progression standpoint? Sometimes I think it's important to shut that noise off and just keep it about you, your role, and a discrete number of ways that you can use this technology to make you a better, faster, and smarter communicator.
I love that. I love that. And that puts you back in the driver's seat, right? There's that, like, how can you empower yourself in this moment of change? And that's a great opportunity to do so. The other piece of advice I give my team and a lot of the folks I have on my team, of course, we're like, A players, we're really looking at how can we move faster? How can we do better? But really, instead of feeling like you need to have all of the answers, use the power of query. So right. Just continually looking at how is this working for me, or just asking others, how are you using AI? How is this working within your job? Talking to your clients, talking to other folks in the industry, and there's just so much learning and information sharing we can do now.
And Joe, I think I'd throw in, if I may, sorry to
Yeah,
interrupt,
no, go for it. This is your
just
time.
one last thing for uh, professional communicators out there who you talked about who aren't as deep in this tech as we are, right? Um, when you do that step back, look at the information hygiene piece. And if some aspect of your job and deals with just, basic publicly available information and sourcing, don't worry about if you don't have a walled garden implementation. Because 9 times out of 10, you might be okay with just using a publicly available model and you can still move forward too. When you get into the sensitive stuff, data privacy regulations, HIPAA information, privileged information, that's where you have to be more careful. But you can also think about it through the lens of what can I do outside of a walled garden that allows me to have that ability for the tool to benefit me in my job too.
Awesome. Fantastic. So you've heard it here. Take a step back, look at what your job is, what you can think you can improve, ask the models what it thinks it can improve based on your inputs, and really just ask others how they're using it to learn more. Tiffany, where can people reach you, find you, hear more about what you're doing at Kite Hill?
Yeah, fantastic. Please follow us on LinkedIn, Kite Hill on LinkedIn. I'm also Tiffany Guarnaccia on LinkedIn, or just come right to our website, kitehillpr.com.
And Adam,
I'm on LinkedIn as well. Track me down, linkedin.com/Adam Pratt.
sounds good. Thank you both for joining us. And thanks again for listening, everybody. Have a good one.